Well, welcome to this programme, which is happening in a very dark and wet March, and this is March 2010, so this is the month when the Infrastructure Planning Commission is being launched. And one of the things I wanted to do before going out and filming is have a good cup of tea and just explain to you some of the principles which we have to deal with as communicators. Now, this is probably the biggest single change to the planning system and the way we're going to communicate about the planning system for the last 30 years. And one of the key things we've learned since we've been communicating and helping developers gain planning permissions for their developments is that the public particularly have got a very set pattern of what they expect from a developer. There's a certain sequence in the process that they expect. They'll find out there's a development coming and they'll develop issues and ideas and areas of concern which they'll want to discuss with the developer. And they feel very comfortable in the sense that they will know that there'll be an opportunity for them to raise issues with the developer. There's a sequence which they expect. Sometimes the sequence varies, but overall, not that much. I mean, minor variations, it doesn't really matter. The comfort zone's there because they know there's going to be an opportunity where they can talk in detail to the developer. The biggest implication in terms of the change we now face is that with the IPC route, consultation happens far earlier in the process. The sequence is different. We're going to be in a situation where we'll have to talk to the public about issues which are very much at the principle stage and not at the detailed stage. This change in the sequence means that both developer and communities are going to be outside their comfort zone. And it's not going to be what they're expecting. So that in its own right creates communication challenges which we must deal with. And when we deal with them, it is possible that we might actually have out of this process a far better engagement with communities so we can take more communities with us when we do development than we've ever been able to do before. So what is the change in sequence that isn't to everybody's cup of tea? Well, it's the introduction of the Infrastructure Planning Commission, of course, the new independent body which has responsibility for making tough decisions about big developments. Developments such as wind farms, and new railways, and new airports, and new motorways, and, of course, power stations. These nationally significant infrastructure projects, which are subject to the changes with the new Planning Act 2008, are going to require consultation with communities far earlier than has ever been the case before. OK, so we're going to start consultation early. It's a bit of a glib statement, but let's just think it through for a moment. We will be engaging so early on in the process that at least in the first few weeks of public engagement, we won't have any of the details that the community will be expecting to see. There will be no artist's impressions or design layouts or even some of the details concerning the scale of development. We are talking that early. So what we're going to be engaging about really is the principles of development, a number of options that might be available to us as developers. And that's good because that's exactly what the planning guidance is trying to ask us to do. The core principle of engagement is that communities must feel as though they have a genuine opportunity to influence a particular development. So they must be seen to actually have a voice that actually influences what's developed in the end. That is the critical difference between this form of early consultation and just good practice in the past. Oh, and another thing. As well as the community consultation, you need to do consultation on the scoping and finally the development of the environmental impact assessment. So as the developers, we've got to make sure that those two aspects of consultation are coordinated effectively. And before we do that, of course, we should check to make sure that local authorities in the area near the development are not conducting their own consultation on other issues, such as local development frameworks, etc. Because there's a genuine possibility that if it's not coordinated in an effective manner, that there could be genuine consultation overload for some of these communities. So what we need to do is not forget the reason why we're going through such a dramatic change in the planning system in this small, crowded island of ours. And to illustrate the point, we've come to this hillside in Wiltshire, where over one shoulder I've got beautiful rolling countryside running all the way from the Marlborough Downs across to Oxfordshire, and over the other shoulder I've got one of the fastest growing cities in Europe, the city of Swindon. And what we have to do is come up with a planning system which allows both communities and developers to feel as though they're being treated fairly. So of course the word fair is a subjective term, and what's happened is they provide us guidance on what they actually mean by proper pre-application consultation. And it's important that we understand the principles of the approach which have been endorsed here. And what it actually says in the guidance is that pre-application consultation should be to allow members of the public to influence the way projects are developed by providing feedback on potential options, providing them with an opportunity to shape the way in which their community develops. And this is a dramatic departure on previous consultation procedures. And as professional communicators, we have to say we endorse the principles of this approach. Because in an island where there's increasing conflict on development, it is essential that we communicate effectively with communities so they understand why development is needed and why it is needed there. Interesting to see that in the guidance which has come out concerning pre-application consultation, they are suggesting that we should be targeting those groups of people who previously had been ignored. So perhaps people with cultural differences, with different languages, people who are perhaps hard to reach, such as migrant workers, or indeed people who might be spending time in hospitals, such as this brand new hospital here in Swindon. These people have also got to be communicated with, and we must listen to what they have to say. So there are many techniques that we can use when dealing with communications on development on a city the size of Swindon. Some of them very tried and tested, the mainstay of communications for development, such as using public exhibitions and media relations. But the guidance goes further, and quite rightly, because when you're communicating at a very early stage in development, you really need to talk about the principles of development. And the best way to do that is to really engage with the community. So it's suggesting using techniques such as workshops and working with community councils to allow the community to pass their views across in a very effective way to the developers. And surely this is a positive move, a move to greater fairness. So once we've completed all this consultation with the different groups we need to talk to, we then need to produce a detailed report which summarises all the feedback that we've received. Because if we remember, one of the core principles that the Infrastructure Planning Commission is trying to get across in this new system is to give communities a genuine opportunity to influence the process. So we need to make sure that whenever we receive feedback, that feedback is recorded and that we demonstrate how we've responded to it. So we should never forget that as we start the process, we have to hold the end in mind. And so one of the final components to consider when thinking about the IPC and the new approach to communications and planning is to go right the way back to think about one of the first things you would do, which is to develop the statement of community consultation and get sign-off from the local authority. Now, if the local authority is happy with the development that's being proposed, this shouldn't be too difficult. The problems will arise when the local authority is not happy with the development that's being proposed. And in terms of our experience, a lot of them are very concerned about a lack of local democracy in decision-making processes which could affect their communities. So if there is a conflict there, this could prove very difficult to deal with in planning terms. And it's interesting to see that in the recent publication by the Conservative Party, with its green paper, Open Source Planning, they identified the need for increasing local democracy in the planning process. They actually want greater involvement of communities and local councillors in the decision process from a very early stage. And what that could mean is that if that ever did become law, the type of pre-application consultation that we see with IPC could become the norm for all types of development. Now, of course, what we would say at Proteus is that's good. We like to see good, effective consultation because that's what we do best. So if you find yourself in the need for somebody to provide support when you're going into IPC, or simply just have something contentious which you need to deliver effectively to a local community, then perhaps you should talk to us the next time you need some help.